in the end, we are even more high-performance athletes than a tennis player is, because the tennis player, after the game or after a tournament, they have a time where they can go somewhere else. We are on 24 hours, 25 hours, 8 days a week, it feels. I used to think life is an ultra marathon. Whereas in reality, life is sprints of various distances and recharge.
Top leaders, meaningful conversation, actionable advice, bulldoze complacency, ignite inspiration, create impact. Produced by Southwestern family of companies. This is the Action Catalyst.
Are you interested in advertising with the Action Catalyst? Our listeners could be hearing about your brand right here, right now. For details, shoot us an email at info@theactioncatalyst.com.
Today's guest is Klaus Kleinfeld, the former CEO of Siemens and Alcoa, the only leader to have successfully served as CEO of 2 Fortune 500 companies on different continents. With a nearly 40-year career spanning multiple industries, he has advised U.S. presidents and global leaders across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, and has recently authored the book, Leading to Thrive.
Oh, Nashville, Tennessee. Okay, that's very nice.
Where in Germany did you grow up again? Or was it?
I was born in Bremen, but I left when I was 18, and my parents were refugees from East Germany. Currently, I'm outside of New York.
Well, ich bin ein echter Bonner.
Oh, wunderbar, wunderbar. Then let's start with that. So how come you speak German?
Both my parents were opera singers, and they're U.S. born in the U.S., but they lived 14 years in Bonn and Cologne.
And they performed there at the does Cologne has an opera house?
It does, yeah. My dad performed locally at the Cologne Opera House. Bonn had an opera house, still does, and my mom performed there. And then she had an international career after that and performed all over.
I love opera. I'm also on the Metropolitan Opera Board, so I just love it. Yeah, lovely, absolutely lovely. And Bonn at the time probably still was the capital of Germany, right?
It was, yeah. My dad and mom would sometimes perform in Berlin during that period, and the way they were paid was always interesting, and you always wondered if your pay would make it back across to the other side.
What were they paid with? Gold coins?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I went to Nuremberg, was my first place of work. Then from Nuremberg, I went to Switzerland, worked there in the pharmaceutical industry, back to Munich. And there I started my career with Siemens, and then Siemens moved me to Erlangen. And then from Erlangen, I was asked to go to New York. Then I was asked to come back to Munich. And then after that, I decided to leave Siemens, and I came back to New York and ran Alcoa, where his headquarters was in New York, so which most people don't know because the presence was usually in Pittsburgh,
When you were a young man, though, did you already envision this path towards administrative leadership of major companies, or were you in it for the details of the science? And
yeah, so no, I did not. I did not imagine that. In fact, I enjoyed learning. I've always been curious and wanted to learn more. I enjoyed being in the outdoors, doing stuff. I only later realized I was forced into working when I was 12. Was my first paying job, because my father died. So when I was so little, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working in core business. For me, it was making money, but it's also something that I started to really like, making things, doing things, I always enjoyed being with people. I also enjoyed complicated problems, so in the early days, I would have thought I'd stay in academia and make an academic career, because I saw what some of my friends who studied with me who went into business, what type of jobs they had. And I thought that I wasn't interested in that,
And so, 12, I got to spend a minute on this and then we can talk. What could a 12-year-old?
Well, first of all, it's illegal to employ a 12-year-old, but the local supermarket. First of all, I was fortunately relatively tall at a young age already, so they never asked me for a passport, So they needed somebody who refills the racks, and ideally comes in early in the morning and changes also the fresh goods, milk and stuff, before the supermarket opens, and be there on the weekends, and where there was a lot of traffic, So I did that, and they paid me 2 Deutschmarks an hour, made my first money. The motive was very simple. I wanted a new bike, for instance, so things like things. I mean, what does a 12-year-old want? You want a nice bike. And very early on, then also I started to love music. So then it became records. I was very intrigued by this thing that had just gotten started called software. As an individual, there was no way you could have a computer. It didn't exist. Even the thought of it was insane. So I wanted to get my hands on a computer and do programming. And at Göttingen, there were only two locations where I could program. One was with the physics department and the other one with the economics department, and I decided to start with the economics department, and immediately got into software writing, which I enjoyed tremendously.
You speak to this a little bit in your book, and maybe this is a good opportunity to take a principle out of the story. Your ability or one's ability to untangle a problem. It's a good visual image because they're like knots in business. And the knots are sometimes created because of a communication issue. Sometimes they're created because of a strategy issue. But what was a procedure that you found most helped you untangle the knots in business?
Asking questions. I think that I don't think I was shy asking questions, and I even today, and I think friends who have worked with me and even those who are not friends who've worked with me would say Klaus is a hypothesis generating machine, because I always try to verify or falsify and find a course and I'd like to drill down to the bottom, to really understand how the mechanics work, because that did me also well already in school. When you understand the principle, then you don't have to learn much. You can deduct everything from the principle. And in a way, that helped me a lot, because I also had to be very efficient with my time, because I had to do other things like work, where other people could spend the time doing homework or whatever, I use logic, so that's the one thing that you can't fault, So first of all, I don't think there is such a thing than a wrong question, So you also have to remind people that they should talk to you in non-expert language. Because way too often have I seen that expert language is a way to hide behind. And very often, certain terms that have been coined in the expert world describe the phenomenon in a limiting way. I mean, language is a limiting thing. That's one of the reasons why you see there are large differences in languages, like, for instance, the Australian Aborigines, when they describe different kinds of red, because they live in an environment. If you've ever been in Australia and fly over it, it's red. The same with the Eskimos. They have gazillions of words for snow, whereas we say it's snowing, and it's snow there. Yes, So I always believe that you have to be careful in accepting this terminology, because it might actually prevent you from finding the real issue. So I asked them to explain it to me in plain language, and I would continue. If they use terms, I would not be shy to say, can you please explain how you use the term? What does that term mean? Then you get it, and very often people then say, well, Klaus, this is complicated. And because if somebody tells me it's complicated, I mean, first I would say in a very friendly way, yes, please explain. And I have time, because that's the other thing that they would say, it takes too much time, and say, no, I have all the time. I want to understand what is this, why don't you explain it, but very often you see very quickly that they can't explain it. And you find then very often flaws in the logic. The moment you have flaws in the logic, you say, why did that individual who's supposedly the expert not ask these questions? Maybe I have to get some other people looking into this, or maybe I have to drill even further here,
This brings to mind another question where I feel that this strength of yours played out, which is that there's really only been, I think, yourself that's captained multiple companies at the CEO level on different continents that are in the Fortune 500, right? There's two companies that you've led as a CEO on two different continents, and that really hasn't been done before. And one was US based and one was German. So, I think about the cultural and language differences between two different countries. What did you find from a leadership standpoint as how you had to adapt?
Yeah, I think that yes, there are a lot of differences, but the fundamentals are similar, because we all as human beings have some fundamental principles that we live by. How we interpret certain things is different, but the fundamentals is everybody wants respect. And I mean, respect comes to simple things, listening to somebody, asking, their opinion, being thankful when they do something. So these type of behaviors are, I think, unilateral all around the world. You have to learn, what exactly what means, Certainly the most tricky thing is sign language. I would advise everybody to be very, very cautious on this, very careful. That can get you into real trouble. If you think that you know the sign language and suddenly realize it means something not so nice to it, their sign word, But those are little things. That you learn. And overall, I think the commonalities, particularly when it comes to leading people, are bigger than the differences. One other principle is that I always try to go as close to the source where the issue originated. Because you very often you have filter processes. I mean, the higher you get, the more theoretical filter processes you have. And to really understand what is going on, I mean, I would always go to the source, and literally to the person who is standing at the machine, where something is going wrong, and understanding what exactly are you observing. That gets lost in translation, I mean, at a certain level, you don't even talk to the head of the factory anymore. You talk to the division head. You want to make sure that you really, really go down to the core.
It very rarely is someone's life just pure accelerated growth. There's plateaus, there's down curves. Klaus, you've had such extraordinary success, not just in arriving in leadership at a company, but helping companies really scale and grow. What have been some of those plateau moments that presented real challenges for you personally?
The first kind of wake-up call shock was when my father died, and I was 10, and basically my life became a very different life then, because it made me ask a lot of very fundamental questions. The next biggest one was when after 20 years, 20 plus years, I decided to leave Siemens. Because obviously after 20 years, you have a lot of friends there, you have a lot of memories, you feel at home. But I decided that the environment was just not worth for me to stay on, and I moved. Very difficult, very, very difficult, And then there's a ton of others, when you have to restructure, sir, and you know that how many families are affected by it, and at the same time, if you don't do it, you risk that everybody will get affected by it. I mean, so by making that, you can at least save the core, and I hope that you can save the core, and you can never be certain, whether it works out or not. So you've done the best you can. You've got all the facts together, and you hope that it will work out after you've done your best. And there's really nobody who, as a leader, who carries the burden other than you. At least that's been my view of leadership. When I take it on, I'm accountable, and I live with the consequences, and I stand up for it.
Yeah, and you mentioned quite a bit around energy, where it stems from, but also how you can recognize which quadrant you're in that moment. One of those quadrants, I think you've labeled as the burnout quadrant. What is it? Low energy, and what was the other variable?
Low energy and negative, so burnout is basically your toast.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one. Let me take a step back. I've always driven for efficiency, because I also never had time, had to do stuff, so I was always driving for efficiency. I always thought it's willpower, good German, willpower, boom, 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 plow through, so until one day I realized it's all about energy. And how did I realize that? I realized it very straight. It came relatively late in my leadership life, So when I realized the following phenomenon, I saw around me people really getting burned out. I also saw that not only older people, but younger people got burned out, and I thought, wow, what is this? And then I love playing tennis, wish I could play better, but I love it, And in the tennis world, I saw another phenomenon. They got older and older and older. the top performers. So I was thinking, what on earth is going on there? In the end, it's all about performance, whether you're in business or whether you're in tennis, all about performance. How come that there's this dichotomy? So I started looking into it, as a curious person, I want to learn more about it. How can a tennis player, who has no time to recover really, just 20 seconds between the serves, how can they do that? And how can they do it at such a late age? And I realized that in this whole high performance scene, the concept of energy had been introduced, and that they were not talking about time management or whatever on the court. They were talking about how do you recharge? How do you keep your energy? How do you get resilience? And then I started my own journey and trying to figure out what is energy? What gives me energy? And I realized it's the old thing of body, mind, and soul. The body, I understand, but then on the mind is basically mental and emotional. And then on the spiritual side, nobody even talks about the spiritual sides, but those are the things, there are no more. Those are the things that give us energy, and they can also drain energy. There's a flow in this because you burn in the morning, you get up, you have a full tank of energy, typically, if you have slept relatively well, and then you burn it through. So, and there are a lot of tricks, that the high performance players have learned, and leaders can learn the same thing. Leaders can learn absolutely the same thing. So in the end, we are even more high performance athletes, than a tennis player is, because the tennis player, after the game or after a tournament, they have a time where they can go somewhere else. We are on 24 hours or 25 hours, 8 days a week. It feels almost, So that got me into this. And in regards to the zones, it's relatively simple. You want to be in performance zone. Performance zone is where you have high energy, positive. But then life happens, So what do? Panic, So you immediately go into what I call survival zone, by high energy, but negative, So what do you do now? You have to find a mechanism how you quickly get back into performance zone. The first thing, when you go into survival zone, it's very good. And the human body is made for this because it's the flight or fight response. We get adrenaline. Our focus goes like this. We get superpowers. The only thing is that the superpower lasts for an hour, for 2 hours maximum, and then you drop into burnout zone. So you have to very quickly get back into performance zone. And what's the trick of this? There's a ton of tricks. Mental training, figuring out the situation, but you have to be aware of it. You get back into it. So life is not, I thought life is an ultra marathon. Whereas in reality, life is sprints of various distances and recharge. Sprints and recharge. Then recharge time and the sprint time is not equal time. It can be much, much less time. Today, there is a really simple way how you can figure it out for yourself, So I mean, many of us have some type of tracker, so, and this tracker shows me my heart rate. The heart rate for me is a super good indicator of whether you're stressed or not, one. The second one is breathing. If your breathing gets very shallow, very fast, then something is going on emotionally with you. The third one is vision. If your vision becomes a tunnel vision, where you only see one thing, then something is going on that is not healthy over a longer period of time, So there are things that you can learn how to observe yourself. And I would think that it's very easy to learn, I don't even have to look at the watch, and I know roughly exactly where my heart rate is, So, because somehow you know your body, how the body feels, when the heart rate is outside of the zone that you want it to be in. It also requires a certain will to change. Certain will to first be confronted with the realities, which unfortunately very often, we kind of know that something is not right, but in the end, we really don't want to hear it because it inflicts stress on us, but at the same time, then if you are not brutally honest with yourself, how often have you seen that people have certain strange habits,
That feedback loop, I've interviewed numbers of executives and leaders, and it's kind of a common feedback when you arrive at a higher level of leadership is that the honesty from your team can diminish because there's less of an incentive directly to the person to be directly honest with their superior, right? How would you go about moderating that risk for those around you? Or how would you go about making sure the feedback was honest, even if it's not always what you want to hear.
By the way, this is one of the big differences. When I was asked to move into a leadership role here in the US for the first time, it's one of the big differences between a German environment and a US environment. The US, I mean, if you as a CEO start a conversation and want a feedback from your team, it's very interesting. The team very often does not offer feedback. They ask you questions. And I realize that the reason why in the US you have that situation is simply because in the US, if you want to fire somebody, the person is gone literally in a minute. And whereas in Europe and in Germany particularly, you can't fire the person, go through a process, because otherwise they sue you, and then talk with the unions and blah, 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 blah. And so in a way, the perceived job security is in this case is a positive enforcer of they are not afraid of giving you feedback, even if the feedback is against what they think you want to hear. Whereas here there's more an inclination to please the boss. So it requires a little bit more of an effort, and I would always do it in a one-on-one and say, may I ask you to give me feedback, and learn the rule of feedback. And the rule of feedback is you do not respond to what the person says. Your response is simply thank you for the feedback, and that's it. If you draw a 2x2, you basically you say, what do you know about yourself and what do you not know about yourself? And you have the second one, what do others know about you and what do others not know about you? And the interesting thing, there is an element there of something that others know about you that you don't know. So what you do with feedback, you open that window. And very often it's these things that you don't even realize, you've adopted some practices, you've adopted some language, you've adopted some diets, that or dress, so that people interpret it in a certain way, which was not your intention. And that's why it's so important for learning. Just look at the Navy SEALs. I mean, after a mission was done, they would criticize what didn't go well, and then they separate the feedback from the person. They don't say, you are an idiot, you didn't do. They will say, this went wrong. It's clear whose accountability it is, but it's a neutral description of how can we get to better performance. So brutal, honest feedback cultures are the fastest learning organizations. As long as it comes with an understanding, this is not about you, this is about performance.
Yeah. So many good things here. Accountability seems to be invited by top performers. So for an executive that might be listening, where they find there's sometimes accountability gaps for themselves, right? How would you advise them to seek accountability for themselves?
Yeah, I think in general, I believe, as we just talked about feedback, I mean, even in larger organizations, I would highly recommend that. And you can run this multiple times a year. It costs you nothing if you want to have it as a real finger on the pulse, particularly if you're going through transition phases, if you have made an acquisition, or you have a major transformation going through, So I would highly recommend that. On a personal level, I think very often people also don't understand why this is so important. And it comes down to what makes a great team. How will you be able to make a great team? And accountability is one of those 5 things that are essential. If you want a high performance team, they are essential. And it starts with trust. That's the core. You have to have trust among your core team. Secondly, we talked about this, what I call conflict. You have to be willing to live with conflict. But conflict here means also very critical feedback, so which many people interpret that as conflict, but people have to have a capability of that. Commitment is big thing, and then accountability, if something goes wrong and you are committed and it was your work stream, you basically say, hey, look, I mean, I did not do well in that moment. I will correct that. And the last one is basically the results. And that's also interesting me, something that very often is not clear. You would not believe how often I see when I ask, I'm mentor CEOs, and when I ask CEOs who complain about that their team is not doing what they think they're doing, and ask them, explain to me, what exactly do you want from them, And interestingly, then they go into a rant. It has to be crystal clear. What does winning look like? The moment you know what winning looks like, and you can align the team around, that's what winning looks like.
Wow. Such a simple question to remember to ask your team members to test.
By the way, we didn't talk about purpose on the energy side. I missed that. Purpose is this thing on the energy. It's a very interesting thing, because purpose does to energy what a laser does to light. It basically focuses the energy around one point. And as you see, light is diffuse, it's nice. The moment it becomes a laser, it can cut through large walls. It can do anything. And that's what purpose does to energy. The moment you know what you want to achieve, what mission you want to do, all of your energy goes to this one point. Visioning is a great exercise. And in my book, I have a long chapter on purpose, because a simple concept, yet a complicated concept. It's a concept that the mankind has struggled with as long as we exist.
What was your purpose? What was the purpose that you landed on?
That's the other thing. My purpose also changed. My purpose changed, and it's not just one purpose. It can be multiple purposes. So my purpose clearly has always been around, I want to raise a lovely family and have a great relationship with my children, and want to have children and want to have a great relationship with my children, and also the family of my wife, and want to be a great husband. At the same time, when I've been running large organizations or even small ones, the purpose was, I want to make this successful. And I want to help people excel in here. The people element also was always there. Those have been constant elements of the purpose, I love it, I change it, or I leave it, So I needed work originally, for making money, but even then I lived by the principles. Even then I believed, I want to get energy from it, and I want to feel that it serves a good purpose for me.
So I love what you said, and it's kind of a great wrap-up point. And if you've probably seen this quote, but it's called "The Master in the Art of Living." In this description, he says, "The master in the art of living is the person that makes it so hard to tell if he's working or playing, because at the end of the day, he's always doing both."
I like that.
Yeah, wonderful. So many good lessons in here, Klaus. I know we could probably go for another hour, but I'll stay to our time. The book was wonderful to do an initial read through, and I'd recommend it. Where can people find and follow your future wisdom outside of what you've authored?
I don't do much on social media. I do LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn profile, you find me on Klaus Kleinfeld, and I do write these things myself, and I do comment also. And and the book can be found on Amazon, and on many other platforms. There's also an audiobook around it, which I really like. I didn't read it myself, but I like the guy who read it, and he has a wonderful voice. I love it. I really love it,
Yeah. So good. Great knowledge today. And coming from someone who grew up in the land of Haribo gummy bears and Beethoven, really glad to spend time with.
Well, Adam, wonderful pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Klaus.
Thank you very much.
If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to subscribe. And to stay updated on everything that the Action Catalyst is up to, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst Podcast, and on Twitter at Catalyst_Action. And thanks for listening.
This is your host, Adam Outland. And outside of this podcast, I'm also the leader for a division of our company, Southwestern Consulting. And our division is the Southwestern Student Coaching Program. And that division we started back in 2020 because the desire we had was to take all these skills that we've equipped executives with. For over a decade, I've coached executives and managers and sales professionals on the skills, the habits, the motivation, and the systems to be successful in their job and in life. And what we realized from working with 30, 40, 50-year-olds was if we could have gotten to them when they were in ninth grade, in middle school, in high school, and equipped them with the same things we're teaching them now, the ripple effects would be huge. And so back in 2020, we decided to formulate a coaching program for youth, equipping youth with the same types of skill development that we typically work on with adults. We just apply it to their world. And what that looks like is teaching them the study skills, the communication skills that they can use every day in the classroom and outside the classroom, coaching them on the mindset and the motivation of someone who's a top performer. And what does that mean? It means helping a young teenager create and craft a vision for themselves. Because without a vision, we perish, but with a vision, we can be equipped with the motivation to dig into our study habits. We can see the connection between our future and the excellence that we have to form on our habits now to be successful in the long run. And we also work on the emotional intelligence. It's how we balance our emotions and manage those emotions when they come up in a way that allows us to communicate effectively with others and to communicate with ourselves. It's about equipping young people with self-talk. That means equipping them with the language that they can use to better direct their thoughts and their mind to accomplish their goals and their aims. And lastly, we equip them with the systems. That means for us, the tools, the time management, and the organization strategies to not just work hard in life, but to work smart. And when we combine all these different areas that we work with our teens on, what we find is that they form the habits early in life that allows them to achieve their goals later in life and even right now. And so our passion is to equip as many young people across this world as we can. And we're doing pretty good so far. We've got teens in 7 different countries who have been through our coaching program to date. We've worked with over 400 teens, and we would love to be able to serve you as well. Here's how it works. If you want to investigate coaching, we start with a parent consultation. That's a free call to discuss your student's particular needs and our program details. We work with Olympic athletes all the way down to teens that are just struggling to motivate themselves to do the daily work necessary in their class. So wherever your teen is, we'll meet them where they are and get them to the next level. And that starts with a parent consultation with you. A student planning session, that's the next step. If we agree that the value that coaching can bring matches your teen, then we will move to a student planning session. It's basically a free one-on-one coaching session with your teen. And that is designed to support them, but it's also designed to ask a lot of questions to help explore whether or not they want to be coached. Because at the end of the day, they ultimately have to be the one that pulls the trigger. And then after your student planning session, we get them paired with the right coach for them. We have an amazing staff of coaches from ex-Division I athletes, people who've come from the Ivy League system. We have coaches who have come from entrepreneurial backgrounds and acting backgrounds, so we can pair them with the right fit for them. And then once they partner with their coach, they'll benefit from 2 coaching sessions a month to really zone in on their personal growth and their skill development. So if you're ready to give your student the tools they need to be successful, click the link in the show notes for more information and to make sure you can schedule your free parent consultation today.